We encourage you to hit the subscribe button right now so you can listen to more podcasts of Operation Truth. Ladies and gentlemen, we do want to hear from you, so we encourage you to email us directly at operationtruthofficial@gmail.com. I want you to know that your messages are likely to be heard, addressed, and listened to on air.
Operation Truth, the show they don't want you to see. Now, here's your host, Lou.
Albert Einstein once said, "The world will not be destroyed by those who do evil, but by those who watch them and do nothing." And that's a little bit about what we have going on today, which is why we remind everyone, abandon this practice of complacency. If you listen to the Border Patrol most recently, past few days, at the end of the month of December 2023, they've identified over 300,000 people having crossed our border. As Tom and I have reminded you redundantly, no one's vetting them. We have no idea who we're letting in this country. And once they get into the country, we give them appearance dates, 6, 8, I heard as much as 11 years before they have to come back and appear. Who is the architect of this system? And why isn't the American public, I would say, more outraged? And that's not a rhetorical question. Why aren't we just up in arms over this? Do you not think this is going to impact you? Are you going to wait until they start to, and there's only going to be a small percentage of them, and that's all you really need. A small percentage of them engage in criminal activity, which is already going on right now in the city of New York, for example. Although the police department chooses to commingle the crime statistics that are being supported by illegals with those who are legally in the country, the reality of it is we could do without the help, folks, if you really understand what I'm saying to you. We're in a crisis here. This country, its future is teetering, and everybody's skipping along, worried about Christmas. I got it. I went through the whole thing myself. You know, we're worried about our vacations. We're distracted because you've got children, but you better start to pay attention to your country because it's creeping up on you day by day. And I have to tell you that they're not even shy about the fact in December they let 300,000 people in with no accountability. And no one is marching in Washington, D.C. saying, what the hell are you doing to our country? Because I have just one very open-ended question. Who's supposed to benefit from this? Who is supposed to benefit when you let, since October 1st, 785,000 plus people into the United States illegally that we have not vetted? Where is the morality here? I mean, where are the Republicans? I don't understand this. And you know what it comes down to? Look, I come from a very incestuous background called law enforcement. So does Tom Fuentes, my co-host. You know, we know all about this. Basically, whatever we engage in, we all just kind of rubber stamp and make like it's okay. We'll put on the smoke and mirrors routine about how we're outraged and we're going to pursue you. But at the end of the day, the Republicans aren't really demonstrating any level of conscience here. You know, we have become morally bankrupt in this country. Does anybody understand the lack of morality when you allow 300,000 people to access this country and we know nothing about you? They change their identities like you change your underwear and brush your teeth on a daily basis. Driver's licenses, passports, birth certificates. You think I would know what a passport would look like from Guatemala or Honduras or Senegal? Or a driver's license? I don't know what the driver's license looks like in Oklahoma. You would think as a country would have one driver's license format would be easier for us to keep track. We don't even have that in law enforcement. You go agency by agency, we have all different ID cards. The difference with us, though, is when we talk to one another, we can tell if you've been in the law enforcement world. There's just that commonality in our thinking and the way that we communicate. That doesn't apply here to our borders. And the borders are becoming a preeminent issue. Because as I said to you guys over 2 years ago, when this was between the lines, and when I said to you guys when I was doing a live radio television show down here in Jacksonville, Monday and Tuesday from 5 to 6, please pay attention to the border. It's catching up to us now, guys. And I laugh when they say, you know, Abbott's moving them around the country. No, the federal government is doing that. The federal government is taking them by bus and by plane load, the same way Abbott is. If you don't believe me, go do a little investigation as to what transpired. It was not this summer, the summer before, I believe it was, up in Westchester Airport, just north of New York City, in the middle of the night. unannounced. The police didn't know. The airport didn't know. All they had was a plane coming in, didn't know who was on it. I don't understand what's going on here. Let me tell you something else, by the way, that's happening in New York City. That's going to happen every place else. They've allowed 25,000 children who are illegal in the country to enroll in our public schools, unvaccinated. We don't know who's coming into this country, guys. Pay attention. You think 300,000 is not a significant number? Let me put it in context for you. We have 800,000 law enforcement agents. Since October 1st, we let over 785,000 people into the country. Does that resonate with you at all? And I'm not trying to offend you, or maybe I am. You know, what's the break point here, guys? At what point does the American public go, enough is enough? You know what? We're not suggesting violence. That's not the answer. Get off your asses and go to the polls in November and take a look at the condition of your economy. The indiscriminate manner in which the criminal element operates in your major cities, all the corporations leaving your major cities. I love Gavin Newsom. Corporations come to California to flourish. Really, you better take a look at San Francisco. 21 left your city. Nordstrom's, Walgreens, I think it's called Homestead. It's a real estate firm. You know, we're losing track of them. Starbucks left Seattle, their home base. These are Democrat-run cities. I'm not anti-Democrat. I'm anti-crazy. And if these were Republicans, Tom and I would say the exact same thing. Tom, I know you hear me talk about this all the time. I know you've got some opinions regarding what's going on at this border. I'd like you to either affirm or contradict what I've had to say.
I affirm it.
No monosyllabic answers. Oh, that's almost a monosyllabic answer. You threw a couple of words.
There was a
Tom, I mean,
monosyllable.
but Tom, there's no one in our Justice Department, our FBI, anyone in our law enforcement mechanism have a conscience.
There are some good people in the FBI now. Now I've heard recently I was at a luncheon and heard one of the directors of HR for the Bureau speaking, and he said that one of the benefits in this country of our woke military is that you have a number of young officers that realize they can't compete with the LBGTQ whatever for promotions. So there's no point in staying in the military. A lot of these people are special forces, Navy SEALs, Delta from the Army, leaving the military because they see that it's so woke, it's broken. And so they're leaving and trying to join the FBI. So you have law enforcement officers that are good officers in many of the departments that are defunding the police or not supporting the police or have prosecutors that won't prosecute. So there's no point in arresting anybody. They won't go to jail. And you have many good young police officers trying to join the FBI. Now, the problem there is the FBI only hires so many per year, and the numbers are about the same. When I came in 1979, 42,000 qualified applicants. From that group, they hired 300. I was one of the 300 hired as a special agent. But right now, those numbers are about the same. They have 40, 50,000 applicants, and it's a couple hundred that are being hired as special agents. But it's a core of young, patriotic, competent agents being directed by just corrupted people like the director, Christopher Wray, and like some of the executives he surrounded himself with. They've got to go. They have, along with the guidance from Merrick Garland, they have weaponized the FBI to go after conservatives, to not be fair in the cases they run or the way they make arrests. Example, back in my day, if you had a white-collar criminal that had never committed a violent act, didn't own a gun, never threatened anybody, whether it's embezzlement, let's say, bank fraud, something along those lines, we had the case against them, even if it was millions of dollars. And then, of course, they would get an attorney knowing they're under investigation. We didn't send a SWAT team to kick down their front door with 25 agents with long guns. We called the prosecuting attorney, called the defense attorney and said, bring your guy in tomorrow or, the next day so that we can take the fingerprints and photograph that person, process them, and get them in front of a magistrate or judge to to handle the arraignment and procedures from there. No, we'll do that. The DOJ would do that today for Democrats, for liberals. but they sure as hell won't do it for conservatives. So they can't wait. Now, one of the things, the reason we have evidence of how they've been so overhanded in some of these arrested is because more people these days have Ring or similar brand doorbell cameras. And so when the Bureau comes in and kicks your door down and sends the SWAT team, like they did with the guy that protested with his boy in front of a abortion clinic, the state didn't prosecute, didn't think he did anything wrong. And the Bureau he's having breakfast with his 7 children and his wife. And you've got the Bureau breaking down the front door, coming in with their long guns, the kids screaming, what's happening here? To arrest a guy who's never been violent, who's never, no indication that they needed to do that, and had already been acquitted in a state court. And then interestingly, in the federal court, when they go after him, I think it took the jury an hour or two to acquit him. So it was just the exercise of, we're going to go after this guy. You better not protest in front of an abortion clinic, or you better not protest at a school board meeting, or you better not go to a Latin mass in Richmond, Virginia. All of these different things that the government, the weaponized Department of Justice, and the FBI at the top leadership have decided that you can't do. We're not going to allow this. So it's not just that people are complacent, it's that they're compliant. And we've been taught compliance. Start with COVID, let's say. You better wear that mask. You better get vaccinated. You can't fly. You can't work. We're going to fire you. If you're a pilot or a firefighter, and it doesn't matter, you do what we tell you. Look at California, Gavin Newsom, you mentioned earlier. Gavin Newsom wanting surfers or windsurfers out on the Pacific Ocean arrested. Where they're going to affect the shark population of the Pacific Ocean with something. So you had that ridiculous lockdown. You had churches being closed, but taverns not. You had different things in most of the states where this kind of stuff was going on. And the lesson for the public was comply, not be complacent, not say we don't care. You do what we tell you. And so now we've had 2-3 years of training by the federal government to comply, like trained SEALs being taught to clap on cue.
I just want to say one thing, Tom. When you brought up all the places we were closing, you mentioned we closed athletic facilities and we left liquor stores open. And that's a fact, number one.
Right.
I want to digress to your comments about the FBI and storming people's homes. I don't think the American public understands that at Mar-a-Lago, where the FBI came in with this gigantic tactical team with heavy weapons, there was an armed United States Secret Service detail assigned. So I'm trying to figure out, when the Bureau staged that, did they come in so heavy because they thought they were going to experience resistance from the Secret Service? I don't understand. I mean, I hate to say this because I know you were involved with the tactical teams with the FBI as well, Tom. But in what world do you operate like this? You have a United States Secret Service detail at their gates. I have pictures of them holding M4s, and our FBI came in like gangbusters. The minute they showed up, you would think if they had the appropriate paperwork and warrants issued by a judge, Secret Service is going to be forced to comply. Otherwise, they would have a consequence attached to it. But this heavy-handedness,
they had no fear. They had no fear of being obstructed by the Secret Service or anybody else in that building. What they wanted to do was something that they've been wanting to do and carrying out at every level, to just humiliate the president. Go into his own home, go through his wife's drawers in her bedroom, do all of these things to humiliate Trump. Had nothing to do with whether it was the documents were guarded or not. He had a right to take classified documents. By taking them, they become declassified, which he has the right to do. Biden had thousands of documents that he took from when he was a senator or vice president that he had no legal right to take. But he wasn't charged. But you have Trump, being prosecuted, persecuted both on the part of the federal government. So the issue was the Biden administration, Attorney General Merrick Garland, and Director of the FBI wanted to humiliate Trump by going in so heavy-handed. And I think there was another ulterior motive, was hoping that Trump had not photocopied many of the things that he took. And one of them was the report of the so-called Russia Gate investigation, known as Crossfire Hurricane, because he had the actual report. And the actual report would be very much, the Durham investigation addressed Crossfire Hurricane, said it wasn't predicated legally, gave all of those things. But Durham didn't name the names of each agent, each supervisor, each executive in the FBI at every level where decisions were made. Crossfire Hurricane, the report would. The report would be detailed enough to have the FD 302s, which is the form the FBI used to document investigation. It would have source information, even if it didn't identify the source, but it would say on that form what the information was. And basically, a lot of information that Trump could do serious damage to the Bureau in the long run, or to the individual people that ran that investigation. And I think that possibly Trump took that as an insurance policy. Don't come after me because I'm going to use this report to come after you if you do that. Well, if he didn't make a photocopy, he doesn't have the report anymore. And just watch this in the next couple of years. If the lawsuits happen and the government orders that Trump did have a legal right to everything that he had at Mar-a-Lago, I'd be willing to bet that Trump will never see that Crossfire Hurricane report again as long as he lives. They'll just not comply. They'll just keep it. And at least keep it out of his hands. That's the main objective. So what you saw at Mar-a-Lago, didn't matter if they had 100 Secret Service agents there. Didn't matter what he did. He had those documents, and you compare that to Biden's got boxes in his garage next to the Corvette, summer home, winter home, whatever, University of Pennsylvania, District of Columbia offices, none of that. And already that special prosecutor sounds like there's never going to be any issue with that concerning Biden when he had no right to have a single one of those documents, not one.
Tom, as you know, and you've spoken to this before, there's some gray area and misunderstanding about the vice president. But clearly, as a United States Senator, you're not allowed to take a paperclip. I don't know where Joe Biden.
I don't think, where's the gray area with the vice president?
No.
Only because women on The View say so?
No. Because Tom, there is a set of circumstances, and you know this, where the vice president can classify, therefore he can declassify a document that he was the architect of. But as a U.S.
normally
Senator,
he wouldn't be able to because he's not conducting investigation. He's not doing the work. That's where the classification
I'm trying to give them the benefit of the doubt a little bit. Hear me out. I'm trying to say I want to give them a little wiggle room as the vice president because I know they're trying to hang their hat on that. You're right. Somebody in the media came out and said erroneously that the vice president can declassify. No, he can't. But as a U.S. Senator, which is a completely separate conversation here, he had no authority to take anything under any circumstances. And I don't understand why he was not criminally prosecuted. That's a felony. You see, the message that we're sending to the United States, the public here, is that we have different sets of rules with different people. So what happens when the government starts to go and try to enforce the law with people and go, hold on a second, I want the same deal you gave Hunter Biden and Joe Biden and this guy and that guy. And then suddenly we have a resistance. What are we going to start to do? Execute our citizens because they won't comply with your request? You see, this is what's so dangerous about this climate today. In the city of New York, where basically you can do whatever you want and you're not going to be prosecuted because of Alvin Bragg. What happens the day you go to take some guy into custody for something stupid and the guy goes, guess what? Don't come near me. He says this to your police and he threatens their safety. We're precipitating this, Tom, in this country because at some point, someone is going to do that. And that's going to open up a whole new can of worms. Look, we've compromised the honor and the integrity and the trustworthiness of every institution in this country. I've spoken to it before on the podcast. I know you agree with me. We've got to figure out how to get this genie back in the bottle, how to dial the rhetoric down. I don't like criticizing the government. I don't like criticizing Biden. But it's not about being critical. It's about telling the truth. There's a problem here. And for whatever reason, the American public, as you so cordially point out, is quite complacent. And they're ignoring this on a grand scale. I'll tell you why I'm nervous about next year. I watched what happened in November of 2022 with the midterms, and the Republicans are having a hard time to stop brushing up against this pro-choice discussion. I watched what happened there. It should have been overwhelming that the American public have had enough of the crazy. But we hung up on this with this pro-choice issue, which is a separate discussion about how women should be allowed to navigate this, not exclusively, but almost exclusively. We got to this past November. We had critical elections taking place in states like Virginia. Once again, the pro-choice issue popped up. The other mistake we're making here is personally, and I went to 16 years of Catholic school, I don't want to hear about anybody's religious beliefs. I want to hear about what you're going to do to enhance the future of our children. Because you and I have had the luxury of growing up in a normal America where we were kind of carefree and could travel about. We weren't worried about being kidnapped, beaten up on subways, or any number of things that people are experiencing today. This was a different America. And I'd love to go back in a history lesson with you right now about John Kennedy and the loss of the innocence of this country and the rude awakening that there's trouble in paradise here, folks, that we have a military industrial complex that drives the discussion far too often. And I'm not going to bump into Nikki Haley right now, but that's one of my concerns with her. And she may be the most electable person right now running, ironically. But you know what I'm talking about, Tom. We turned a corner after that assassination and suddenly the light went on. There's a problem here, and it has to do with who's steering this ship, and it's resonating right through now. But I think, Tom, what's missing here, and I think you'll agree, is accountability. There doesn't seem to be any. It seems like our government officials, regardless of what side of the aisle they're on, almost operate with impunity. And whatever their boys club wants to rubber stamp, they rubber stamp. Look, we do it in law enforcement. Let's not lie about this. I watched this cover for cops that they had no more business being a police officer than I do doing surgery, on your brain. But once you get sworn in, you're in the club, all of a sudden you have impunity. I joke about this kid Santos, not to entertain anybody, but I should have coached him and said, look, you don't lie to get the job. It's after you get in, then you can lie your ass off. You're lying.
Well, Lou, there is accountability in Washington, D.C. Accountability of the coach of the Washington football team. That person can be held accountable. We'll see what happens. With their losing record this year, he may be out. But everybody else with a losing record, whether it's, anybody else in the administration, no problem. No accountability. Don't even worry about it.
Funny you brought that up. Both their pro athletic teams have left Washington, D.C. and moved to Virginia. We talk about these corporate entities. That's a big business. The NFLPA happens to be my client, the NFL Players Association. So I am familiar with them a little bit. But they happen to have left Washington, so he's off the hook there. I wonder if he'll get beat up in Virginia the way he was in Washington, D.C. But, we need a course correction here. What's interesting also is we have 535 people represent 360 million people here. I don't know how that works. I have to say something else, Tom, and this goes back to this migration issue. At the inception of the country, the population of the country was roughly 2.5 million. If you Google it, that's what it'll tell you. During the Kennedy administration, it was 180 million. Population's doubled. Did the founding fathers have this notion that we will allow everybody from all over the planet to come into the United States and we were going to be able to commingle their ethnicity, their religious denominations, their cultures, their lifestyles? Is that what the master plan is here? And we spoke about this in other podcasts, and you mentioned it yourself about this lack of assimilation. But people don't understand today, we don't have the ability to assimilate anybody. Forget the fact we don't have the will or the desire to. We just don't have the ability to.
Well, 250 years ago, the assimilation happened because people leaving predominantly Europe, coming to the United States, were going to see or stay or live near relatives, people they knew from the town that they were in. And that's not just Europeans. You have, a town just outside of Detroit where a number of people from Yemen went for the auto industry, and then their friends and cousins went. So you have this whole town basically of Yemeni people. Well, they assimilated because some people from Yemen already had arrived there. They had already assimilated and helped the new arrivals. But when you have these people coming in hordes, like the number that's coming in now, there's no way to assimilate them. The founding fathers weren't worried about it because the lower numbers met up with people from their town or their culture, their country, and that helped them assimilate. Even when there was no formal government program, we're going to help you assimilate. Well, right now, you don't really have a government program other than welfare and all these things that they get when they arrive. But it's always been based on family ties, that members of the family or cousins or other distant relatives had already arrived in the US, had already been here 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, had already learned the language, had already learned enough of the culture. So that helped new arrivals from their hometown in whatever country assimilate. But now when you have this horde coming in and they just get sent willy-nilly around the country, whether it's New York City or Chicago or whatever, who are they joining up with in New York City? Nobody. Or Chicago or Red. There's no connection to help them assimilate. They're on their own. And so then you have a variety of issues come up from that, and they're not going to assimilate, not even close. So you have to keep the numbers at a reasonable low level that people can gradually come in and assimilate, not just overwhelm the country. And the other problem is that you see this, Minnesota, Minneapolis area being a good example. All these immigrants come in from Somalia, let's say, and we let them in as refugees, a terrible system in Somalia, and they come in. They don't try to assimilate to the United States system. They try to get the United States to assimilate to their system. They want Sharia law. They want the customs that they want to bring what they left with to the US and implement that here. And you're seeing this already, that, to foretell what's going to happen here, take a look at Europe. Europe, back when Angela Merkel was, running Germany and these other ones, they let in millions of Syrian refugees and others who have been a horrible headache to the regimes in Europe ever since. Pretty much. You have cities, one in Stockholm, Sweden, where there's a part of the city that's a no-go. Police won't go in there. They've just walled it off and said, no, we're not becoming an American city. You're supposed to become like us. And that's how it is. So you have these city ghettos forming like that. Paris is like that. It has this Muslim area. They don't integrate into the rest of the Parisian culture or French culture. They're on their own, and they want you to adapt to their culture, period.
Tom, it's been stated by leaders of countries like Czechoslovakia, Hungary, and Poland. There is a disconnect between Islam, their lifestyle, and its compatibility with the lifestyle of Czech, Poland, and Hungary. And to be honest with you, we're experiencing it here. No one wants to say it because we're Islamophobic. All you have to do is take a good hard look at how they treat women. That will tell you in into itself they're not in stride with what we're doing. But I want to just go back just for a moment, Tom, and talk about the fact that we've had 10,000 people plus access the United States illegally for a 30-day period, which represents the over 300,000 people that came in through December. That's a demonstration of exactly how little they think of the American public, that they somehow thought that this is good and this would benefit us. Now, I want to go back to Europe. And I know, Tom, right now, a lot of these European nations, like Ireland to start with, are looking to push them out. The rape rate in Sweden is through the roof. The Swedes welcomed them in also. In a perfect world, things like this would work. This is when I go back and say to you about this foreign policy and abandoning Afghanistan, the women and the young girls there. I don't know where the word morality intersects with any of these conversations today, or for that matter, criminality, because there's a lot of that going on. But for whatever reason, we can't seem to enforce anything. We can't seem to hold anybody accountable anytime they cross a threshold they shouldn't cross, whether it's our borders, whether it's our foreign policies. To be honest with you, our major cities, you and I know, both backed by our backgrounds. And, I've had the good fortune of not only just knowing you, but I'm friendly with former police commissioners. And I've had relationship with one in particular in an advisement capacity, former chief of detectives. We could fix the cities in 24 hours, literally. Impose a curfew, deploy the National Guard, commingle them with law enforcement, and send one message out to start with. No more guns in our streets. We're not going to have any of our children be collateral damage any longer. Easy fix. The energy sector, not as easy, but relatively, we could get our handle on that real quick. Let's start by opening up the Keystone Pipeline and start generating our own oil again, as we had 4 years ago or 3 years ago. We were energy independent. This border issue is a whole different discussion, Tom, that you and I have spoken to. We don't have the assets to vet them, assimilate them, or deport them. So what's the end game here for the American public? I'm just curious. Who is it in Washington, D.C. that has such little regard for this country as a whole? I don't understand this. And we're sitting on our rear ends letting this happen. I watched this last election. I got to tell the Republicans, pull your heads out of your rear ends, folks. Stay away from this abortion issue, and you might want to take a different look at it. It's not as cut and dry as you'd like it to be. After going to 16 years of Catholic school, graduated Catholic University, the Roman Catholic Church doesn't believe in abortion, birth control, divorce, or homosexuality. I only have one thing to say to you guys. Please get in the real world with me, okay? This is just not a feasible way to think when you're dealing with people in real life circumstances. You got to have a little more pliability. And guys, I want to go back to the state of California, where we have a very vocal individual called the governor, Gavin Newsom. This guy put a whole new spin on this term slick. And I'm not saying that because he's a Democrat. If he were a Republican, I'd say the same thing. This guy does not skip a beat telling you a lie. Right now, as he's telling you, corporations go there to flourish and they're leaving. People are leaving in mass numbers, including his in-laws. They've moved to Florida. He's just authorized 700,000 illegal immigrants to receive full health care benefits. I only have one very simple question I ask all the time. Who's paying for this? Who's paying for the illegals in New York? I got to tell you this also. New York City finally gave the cops an overdue and well-deserved raise of 24%. Where are you getting the money? Where are you getting the money to supervise these pro-Palestinian protests that take place on a daily basis? Even on Christmas Day, the Muslim element in this country want to cancel Christmas. Guys, you better open up your eyes and take a look at what's going on. This isn't anti-Semitism. This is anti-Western world. And the solution is simple. If you don't want to assimilate, I want to help you personally, then go back to where you came from. Because at some point, this might get ugly. Now, what's so interesting about this is that the Islam represents 1.2% of our population. That's it. Look at the disruption. I keep telling everybody, a minuscule percentage of this culture disrupts and destabilizes this country and our cities on a daily basis. I don't know how to say this in a nice way, but somebody better grow some balls in plain English and stop worrying about getting reelected and worry about doing the right thing for once in your life. I listened to this guy, Eric Adams, and I got to give the guy credit. He came out flat out and told you the immigration issue is going to destroy the city of New York. A 5% across the board reduction in services, police, fire, sanitation, and even education, because they have to support the migration issue, the illegal immigrants in the city of New York. I give him credit for that. But I'm watching him allow people take over our cities and prevent emergency service vehicles from getting to people that might need medical aid or getting into hospitals, like children struck by autos or people in cardiac arrest. This is what's resonating through the country. My attitude is we've overgrown the country. Tom doesn't agree with that. He thinks we have the ability to manage it. Maybe we have the ability to in a perfect world, but we lack the resolve. Guys, we could talk about these topics all day long. And what's interesting is I can bounce from topic to topic. And what the common denominator is? Every one of these discussions I have with you are going to translate to the demise of the future of the young people here who are entitled to something. I want to say something else. I'm tired of listening to people from my generation label our young people Generation X and Generation Z. Let me tell you the difference between Generation X and Generation Z and my generation. I came into the world. We didn't question the government. We didn't question the media. We didn't question the judicial system. We didn't question science or medicine or now our educational institutions. They come out of the womb without the foundations they need to believe in. And you wonder why they're bouncing from pillar to post and gravitating towards concepts that don't really align with common logic and thinking, like they think socialism is good. Yeah, maybe in a perfect world, but not in this world. This is the whole thing. Everybody's got to get into a reality here. I tell you something else, just as a piece of advice. The next time you elect someone, don't pick somebody whose background was a bartender. Get out and travel the world, travel the country, learn about the country, the diversity, this concept of us being products of our environment. The worst thing about New Yorkers is they leave New York and they go every place else in the country and they think people are going to march to the beat of that drum, and they're not. You've got to go in and take a look at who you're dealing with and enjoy the fact that they're different than we are, because God forbid, we only had us. because we are flawed to the nth degree. Do other assets are coming from New York? Absolutely. You are just saturated with information, data, good, bad, ugly, whatever. We're just overcome with it. It hones you, but that's not the exercise. The exercise is to learn across the country, which I go back and say to you, tell me how you did that as a bartender. And now you have so much to say about what's appropriate or inappropriate in government. And I'm not picking on anybody in particular, but I look at the background of many of these people. You know what I like about Talib and Omar? They were brought here from an oppressive world to sit here and criticize a country that allows them to flap their mouths. That's the truth of the matter. You know, Talib is about as American as I am Russian. And at the end of the day, if you're not happy here with the way things are and you can't implement change through peaceful means, maybe you should leave. And the same thing for Omar. You both spew anti-Semitism. I don't know what else to say. You know, I want to close on this for today. I have a lot of friends that are Jewish coming from New York. I have a lot of friends that are Puerto Rican, black. I was the only white kid in the black neighborhood when I was born. So I don't want to hear anything about prejudice. I don't have time to hate you because of the color of your skin. What's the deal with the Jewish community and the Democrats? Just tell me what this is about. They have anti-Semitism. They're not even shy about saying it, and you continue to support this agenda. Where's the outrage, Bernie Sanders, Adam Schiff, Chuck Schumer? I could rattle them off for you. Where's the outrage? I never hear a word from you. They're never censored. Oh, they finally, I think they censored Talib. How about this one? How about you remove her from office for conduct unbecoming? You know, in law enforcement, this is like the catch-all. They can bang you any day of the week for conduct unbecoming. Why aren't there standards like this imposed on our elected officials? Why are you allowed to cross any threshold and say things that lend itself potentially to violence? When you talk about from the river to the sea, that's talking about the demise of Israel. I don't know what to tell you. I ask my friends that are Jewish in New York all the time, how do you support Democrats? I'm just asking you. And by the way, if the Republicans had this agenda, I would be equally critical. Guys, we're going to wrap it up for today. I'd like to bring Tom back in if he's here with closing comments or remarks.
No, I'm here,
Tom?
Lou. No, I agree
Good.
with you completely, Lou. You know what you've been talking about. I lost my internet for a few seconds, but
That's okay.
got it back. But no, you're right. How do they support a party that says nothing, about whether it's anti-Semitism or, you know, the prevention of separating policies that are Israel or the Zionists that run the political parties like Netanyahu versus Jewish people? There is a difference. Not all Jews support right now what Netanyahu is doing in Gaza. Many do, but not everyone. So there is, you know, a separation there or a difference. And, you know, when you talk about Israel, the last major war that Israel was in was 50 years ago, the Yom Kippur War, 1973. And back in the day, after Israel had become a country in 1948, when they got in a war with the neighbors, if they went to, the U.S. was supporting them, but if they went too far, the U.S. president would call Israel and say, you've gone too far, back up, back off, go back. In the Yom Kippur War, that's exactly what happened. So Israel was being attacked by Egypt and Syria. They were pushing into Israeli territory, and Israel then fights back. We help, of course, but they fight back, and they end up pushing the Egyptians back across the Sinai, deep into Egyptian territory. And then Russia starts to say, wait a minute, we've been helping Egypt all along. This is going to expand into a global war. President Nixon calls Israel and says, back up, back off, go back to Israel, get out of Egypt, and negotiate. So Israel and Egypt negotiate and form basically a partnership against terrorism, and also supporting both of their borders. There's a strange concept. And in the meantime, they have not fought a war with each other in 50 years. And even now, the Egyptian government does not want to take Palestinian refugees because many of Hamas's people came from the Muslim Brotherhood, which was a terrorist group in Egypt, political group also. And so Egypt says, no, we're not taking Palestinians back because a large percent of their population supports Hamas or actually is Hamas. We don't want to take a chance. Well, we won't be able to vet them. We don't want them coming into Egypt. And they said, no, the neighboring countries, Jordan, Syria, and the other one, no one will take Palestinian refugees because of that. So that's the situation now, but that goes back decades. And you have a different situation with what's going on in Gaza right now.
What's interesting, Tom, is that I'm talking to some friends of mine without divulging what circles they travel in. And the chatter on the street is that both Egypt and Saudi Arabia, for example, are quite pleased that the Israelis are going after Hamas.
Yeah.
Officially.
And I've said that several times, that's how that works. That's why they're not criticizing Israel.
Exactly correct. It's really kind of interesting that, they don't mind Israel doing their bidding. What I find also, not to hang up on this whole thing with the Middle East, but we keep talking about Iran supporting this and Iran supporting that. Why aren't we going after Iran? We want to go after the Houthis or the Houthis or whoever the hell they are. And we're going to tap dance with Hezbollah. We're going to tap dance with Hamas, but they're all being funded and motivated by Iran. Why don't we go right to the head of the fish here, folks? What is this foreign policy about? And unfortunately, with this country, Iran, it isn't an if, it's a when. That's really what we're dealing with there. And the other part to this discussion that people should be aware of is if Israel really gets an inkling that they're going to get their hands on a nuclear device, Israel's going to go after them because there's no ifs, ands, or buts about where that device is going to be directed the minute they get it. And it doesn't take a real sophisticated delivery system, Tom. It's more like a hop, a skip, and a jump. We're not crossing oceans to get to Israel. You know what I'm talking about here. But what I find so interesting is that, everything's so convoluted today, and I live by this thing, keep it simple, stupid. Just tell everybody the truth. Let's try that on for size. Tom, I think we should adjourn for the day. And, when we come back next week, I want to go back into this discussion about the Kennedy administration. Not so much about his assassination, because there's a lot of conjecture and speculation and opinions as to who drove it. I've heard some things from people that I consider to be fairly credible, like yourself. But I really want to talk about the trajectory that it put this country on and how we got here. And the most important, how we can get this genie back in the bottle, if it can get back into the bottle, or is the future of the country is that we're going to fragment. I hate to use this term secession because it has a different oral optic attached to it, but I don't think the country's going to hold up much longer the way we're going because, I can only tell you this, my mom was a Southerner, and the stupidity that flies up north doesn't fly in the South. People in the South are simplistic people. They use common sense and logic, reason, words that have left the conversation, by the way. There's still a level of civility and respect down South. I don't know what's going on up in New York. I do want to say that we don't spend enough time dissecting the media who are really leading the charge and dividing this country the way it is today. They're really at the root of this problem. And I've said this before, and I'm going to continue to say it. I don't know of another institution that doesn't have oversight. I did want to ask you one question, Tom. If someone in the FBI, when the president was elected, came out boastfully and said, I'm going to impeach that MF on the first day he got sworn in, would you have a career in the FBI?
No.
Thank you. So maybe you can explain to me how Tlaib was able to do this and she wasn't removed from Congress. They talk about Donald Trump. They're equally as bad as he is. And that's an example. That was the first day in office. This cannot be the conduct of our elected officials. It's a terrible example for our children. By the way, I remind everyone, my wife and I spend 3/4 of our day teaching our kids not to do things that are being done by our elected officials and people in the media. You have to teach children civility. We remind them, you kids, it's interesting because I had children late in life. The simple rivalry, the kids go at it with each other. But I'll tell you something else I found. The minute something external enters the equation, they kind of galvanize their forces. And it's really very interesting. But we're going to wrap it today, Tom. I do want to go and talk a little bit about what happened to this country after we decided to eliminate John Kennedy from the equation. And I think more people should really take a look into this man, because when you listen to him speak and you listen to his focus, it was directed on finding peace, something we're not trying to do today. We're trying to figure out and remind everybody on a daily basis why we don't get along. And that's a big part of the media. And even our elected officials are involved. Some of them on the fringes are doing that on a daily basis. I'll give you the closing comment, Tom, for the day, and then we'll adjourn.
No, I look forward to continuing that discussion next week and the episodes that we have coming up. It will be very interesting.
Thank you guys for joining us. OperationTruthOfficial@gmail.com allows you to contact, communicate, criticize. We're not looking for everybody to just agree with us, guys. That's not the exercise. We're trying to open up a dialogue, but we want to have more people become part of this discussion, and we need to expand this platform. I'd love to go into some of these college environments and start speaking to the young people by just first apologizing to them for screwing up their world. See you next time, guys.
Okay,
Thank you,
thanks,
Tom.
Lou.